Welcome, Jim Haughton, who's the director of a Harlem-based organization called Fight Back.
In their own best interest. That's doable. Now, how do you do that?
How do you do that?
How do you do it? Already, look, people are already trying to do that already. I think Seymour could tell you he's had some contact with some of the trade unions in Washington.
Okay.
They're certainly thinking about it. On the community level, and there are a lot of different community organizations, we have to sort of come together and begin to spell out the kind of program, the kind of information that you're hearing here today. How do we organize ourselves on a community basis? For instance, I could see in the not-too-distant future if folk really begin to commit themselves to doing the kind of organizing necessary, moving hundreds of thousands of people down to Washington. That's where the money is at. These are the folk who are making these decisions. These are the folk who are putting more money into the military budget. These are the four people who are ignoring it. These are the four people who are seeing, who are paying for American industries leaving this country and going overseas, taking jobs from the American people. So there has to be something outside of the established Republican Democratic Party, the election process. Got to be a massive movement independent of that.
Could I ask one question from you, gentlemen? All right, we'll go to Washington, but what about your legislators here at the very bottom, and your state legislators?
Here too.
Here too. How do you do?
Here
because
too.
you've got to make this honor.
Absolutely, Florence. Here in New York City, where Giuliani and company are cutting back on everything.
Okay, that's
right. And keep in mind, so under the here you're having the thing that you have to balance the budget. Now something as ridiculous as all that, and balancing it on the backs of the poor people. He doesn't talk about just the payment of the debt service, which is something like $2.7 billion on the debt service, just paying the debt service.
Interest payments on New York City bonds to the bond holders.
Right. All right. But he doesn't say declaring a moratorium on that. Those folk got more money now than they need. They're not hard put for money. But he doesn't even mention that. He mentions how you're going to cut back on spending for schools.
Yes.
Welfare
want to get rid of containers.
Youth programs, health programs. How do you cut back on all that? But not how you cut back on the $2.7 billion, which is more than the entire budget gap, which I understand is something like $2.3 billion, right? So that's only going to change when the people get back out into the streets. I could see 100,000 people around City Hall. Lock up City Hall. Demand that mayor and the city council begin to respond to the economic needs of the massive poor people in this city. Black and white. That's what has to be done. The mass media totally ignores this.
They don't.
There's no talk about
the military.
Seymour is laying out here. The impact of the military. No talk about what, a half-century of military spending. That's roughly $8 trillion. What it has meant to the American people because of all the illusions that I ticked off just a little while ago. The media have pushed aside all information, all discussion, all analysis of what military spending has done to the American politically. But there was a lot of hope in Harlem. Look at Harlem 50 years after the Cold War, and it's a community totally devastated, totally in decay. This is around the country. In the poor black community, in the poor white working class community, you find this kind of growing devastation. It is directly attributable to the fact that the government of the United States, pretending to represent the people of this country, are squandering the resources on this kind of military insanity.
Here, here.
The passing of the Housing Act, I believe it was 1938. They moved to wipe out public housing. They all but did that. But there was a lot of opposition from tenant organizations, the National Tenant Organization, people who fought to keep public housing. They're going back again under this contract against America, that's basically what it is, to wipe out public housing. Now, public housing is desperately needed in this city. As you heard Seymour say earlier, there's some 300,000 families waiting to get into public housing. There's over 100,000 people living on the streets. Growing homelessness all across this nation. They are going to increase, the contract against America is going to increase military spending some $60 billion. Clinton wanted to increase it by $25 billion. The contract against America folk want to increase it to $60 billion. And they also want to wipe out public housing. They also want to wipe out aid to dependent children. They don't want young women who have babies out of wedlock to get any kind of financial relief. They're blaming these young people for the economic crisis in this country, when the economic crisis is due to this kind of insane military spending. And this is devastating. This is like this is the most criminal, the most crass form of behavior that any government could perpetrate against its people.
And and let's not forget that they also have tacked on 80 million or 80 billion for more prisons.
Yeah, $90 billion for the, and then they even talk about...
We've got to be able to relate this to what's happening to people every day. You got to.
Franz, I got to touch upon the fact, too, on that score, because I've always seen a relationship between racism and militarism. They go hand in hand. The kind of racism that we see growing in this country, with the major burden of these cutbacks falling on the people who could least afford it. It doesn't impact on the rich. It impacts on the poor, particularly black poor. You know, and you start that going, and then it begins to affect the entire American working class of people. It pulls everybody down. And that racism and militarism are a formidable power, ideology, structure in this country, that if we don't find the ways to break that, then it will break the people. It will break this country.